All right, everyone, we start off today with some dense political material. We've got a slew of new polls, and we've got to look at this for what it really is and what it represents within the Democratic Party. These are the Democratic primary polls. We're not interested in anything having to do with the Republican side because Trump is the nominee. He's going to accept, they're not going to say, well, Mr. Trump, you're not allowed to run for the presidency as the incumbent. We're going to have like Mike Pence do it, or, who else? Jeff Flake. We're going to have Mitt Romney do it instead because we think he'd win. You'd have to be nuts. I'm looking at this slew of polls, and I'm seeing a reality that's drastically different from what's being reported by the legacy media. They're rambling about how Elizabeth Warren is now the frontrunner. Joe Biden is ahead in 5 of these 6 recent polls. The problem is this. The Warren poll, Quinnipiac comes out, has Warren at 28, Biden at 21. It has her well out ahead. It also appears to be a slight outlier for Buttigieg, having him at 10 instead of somewhere around 6 or 7. This one is the counterpart to the other poll. CNN's poll shows Biden ahead by 15 points. I think the truth is somewhere between them. If I just aggregate these numbers, Biden is ahead by 5 or 6 points. That makes him the front runner by a comfortable margin. Something that could change, as we've seen this is now a volatile race. One problem, by the way, we've got RCP open. If you've got the actual tab open instead of a screenshot, is every once in a while it refreshes, because it's convinced you'll get new polling info. Trust me, if you're on a state-to-state page, you never have to worry about that. The most recent polls in some of the most important early states are like weeks old. I really hate that. I wish the polling firms would do better. So the lineup right now, we've got Biden on 27.2. This is in the aggregate. Keep in mind, single polls don't matter. When you hear a bunch of news about the Quinnipiac poll, it's because the pundits want Warren to be the nominee. Ignore it. Warren at 21.8, Sanders at 17.3. By the way, ticking upwards slightly after a bit of a slump. It looks like he's evened out. Buttigieg at 7. Harris at 5.3, and then everyone else peters on out. If you're below 5 points, in the race at this particular juncture, why are you even in? I don't even realize why the bottom half of the field has to exist. What the DNC should consider, I know this is going to sound draconian, it could consider a cutting off point in order to weed out packed fields, to eliminate the potential for anyone in the bottom half of the field at some arbitrary point to actually get in. Unless there are certain thresholds crossed, there would be a rule instituted that they couldn't be nominated. So that essentially they would have to switch to an independent candidacy or drop out. That sounds draconian and maybe even tyrannical, but strategically thinking, when you get to a later point in the race, when you start talking about you're muddling through into the 5th or 6th debate, your opponent is outraising and outspending you badly, you still don't have a platform, emergency measures might need to be considered. I'm not actually seriously advocating this, but if anyone's going to do it, it'd be the Democrats. Think about it. The Democrats, they have a superdelegate system. That's not democratic. They change their rules on a whim, specifically to favor corporate frontrunners as opposed to maybe a Sanders grassroots campaign or a Gabbard Maverick. So they could do that. It wouldn't be any more slimy than what they've done anyway. It wouldn't be any more slimy than the 2012 convention where Ron Paul was shafted so badly, despite the fact that technically speaking he had enough leverage so that he should have at least been allowed to give a speech. Couldn't be as slimy as what's already happened within modern American politics, so I wouldn't put it past him, and at the very least, it would give the illusion that the field was beginning to congeal to some degree. They wouldn't have to worry about who's in or out of the debates. They could stop worrying about that. They could have the top 6 or 7 candidates in and force everybody else out. Anyway, what I see here as well are some trend lines building. Warren has peaked now. Her peak was a few weeks ago. She's now receding. Her peak brought her above Biden in the aggregate very briefly. This is no different, by the way, than when Kamala Harris very, very briefly was just ahead of Sanders and Warren and was in a comfortable second place position. She then slid down. Her rise was too precipitous. What I predicted a week ago, or I think several weeks ago now, was that Warren's rise began to resemble a peak. I couldn't prove it because, of course, hindsight's 20/20, but I can't predict whether she stabilizes or does what most candidates do, because there are a few exceptions, notably Trump, to this particular trend. She peaked in the aggregate at about 27 points, which is exactly roughly where Biden was at the time. She has now fallen down to under 22. That's in the aggregate. That's not a single poll. That's not an aggregate of a single polling firm. This is a poll of polls situation. Biden, he's leveled out. He's at the same level he's been at for a very long time. He has stubbornly clung to this very, very narrow wavelength that takes him between maybe 26 and 31 or thereabouts. That's his range. Somewhere around there is Biden's long-term core fan base that pretty heavily supports him. He's got more than a quarter of Democrats behind him, and here's the importance of that. Here's the importance of these metrics. And Sanders, he's got between 15 and 20. He's already peaked, I think. If he does have his peaking moment, it'll be surprising to me because I don't think he's charismatic and young enough to pull it off. I hate to tell the Bernie bros, I don't think he has another peak in him. He'll stay viable. He'll stay in. He'll win some states, and he'll definitely, in a tough brokered convention with a lot of pandering going on, he could be a kingmaker, absolutely. He could get in as maybe the running mate, which would be hilarious because typically that's not how it works. You wouldn't normally choose a nearly 80-year-old man to be your vice president. You'd choose someone younger. Bernie Sanders is older than anyone else in the field. What I think is this. I see a trend here where Joe Biden remains at the same level he's been at because it doesn't seem anything prevents him from doing so. If something goes wrong, he swings to the low end of his long-term average, around 26 points. If things are going well, he rises up maybe to 30, 31, maybe even 32 on a good day. Somewhere around there is where he stays for the rest of the race. If it remains crowded, that gives him the win, especially if in the early states he does well enough. Otherwise, if he flubs it in Iowa, if he comes in third in Iowa somehow, he misses out on New Hampshire and stuff, he starts to look weak, then that could change things. But if he's able to take Iowa, I think he becomes the nominee. This means that the Democrats are fundamentally unconcerned with winning the 2020 election. They would rather ramble about impeachment and hope maybe that somebody else gets in the race to save them. They're beginning to mutter about the weakness of the field. When Joe Biden, with his incoherence and his health issues, which he does clearly have, and the problems of his past baggage, the lynching thing that was big in the news. If I hadn't been running all around Amsterdam yesterday, I would have done this as a morning video. Joe Biden using the same wording as Trump has used on the same topic of impeachment back in, 1998. He's speaking about it in the context of the Clinton era. Which is very, very funny because then the next day he comes out and his staff couldn't possibly have told him this was a good idea. He comes and says, yeah, I remember saying that back then. Yeah, I knew full well I had said it at the time. By the way, I'm dumb enough so that I only apologized once pressed on this by other people, groups that were allied with Trump that pushed me on the issue so that I would look like a cuck, so that I would look weak. He didn't win any fans from this engagement. And this is his idea of strategic sense. People are beginning to talk about Hillary 2020. I hope it happens. I hope I'm wrong. I don't think she gets in. I think that all of this, she hasn't ruled it out stuff. It's like, at some point, even Hillary Clinton can't be nuts enough to think that that's going to happen. She can't possibly be that nuts. I can't believe it. I hope I'm wrong, though. I hope H.A. Goodman is right. I hope he makes a 30-hour-long video of him just sitting there chuckling himself to sleep with a picture of me in the background saying, you're fucking wrong. Because at the very least, for the subsequent year, my life will be really, really easy. There will be news every day. I'll never have to worry about digging for things to talk about because Hillary Clinton will supply me with enough cringe for the entire election cycle. She'll also torpedo the Democrats' chances completely just by being there. Especially when it becomes clear that, hey, she has a hardened fan base too. It's probably in the double digits, probably gives her enough buoyancy so she starts out in third place. It'd be hilarious to see her engaging Bernie Sanders and trying to outwoman Elizabeth Warren and also trying to go toe-to-toe with Joe Biden, looking like a total scumbag neoliberal would be hilarious. I just don't think it's likely. They even mentioned Michelle Obama. Somebody on Twitter RT'd it at me, basically. They're like, oh, well, you called it. Yeah, Michelle Obama's definitely one that they would love to get in. Too bad she's ruled that out long ago. She said, no, I don't have a life in politics. Fuck it. I don't want to be in politics because I've seen how messy it can actually be. I can respect that. Yeah, she's a good person. She's decided not to be a political scumbag. But there are a lot of political scumbags already in the race. Why is it that the Democrats have a random spattering of 20 different people and none of them are qualified? Don't you think that if you take 20 people they're ambitious enough to try to run for the highest office in the land. They've gotten in there, most of these people are at least, they got 2 or 3% support. They got some hundreds of thousands or millions of core fans. You'd think that one of them could possibly rise up and show themselves to be capable of the job. After this many months and 4 different debates, you'd think that at some point somebody would look viable. Usually by now somebody is at least, somebody stands out a little bit. Somebody stands out from the pack. The closest thing that you have is that the pundits all circled the wagons around Kamala Harris for a brief moment in time thinking, well, she's got the age range, she's got the tiger mom sort of thing going on, but then she failed them in 3 debates in a row, crushed her own campaign, and now they have to just talk about how she owns Don Jr. on Twitter. The Democratic primaries are a free-for-all. Trump is very, very quickly positioning himself to win in 2020. They don't even realize it. They're too busy talking about impeachment. They're too busy chasing ghosts that keep distracting the Democratic laypeople away from demanding what they should be doing. What the Democratic laypeople should be doing, that is you as a Democrat voter potentially, is demanding that the party form a coherent, winning platform. A strategic platform able to cause the majority of the country to support it over what Trump is offering them. You can't focus on economics because you've got a Trump economic boom right now, whether you want to admit it or not. You've had steep tax cuts to the working and middle class, whether you want to admit it or not. It's been openly analyzed even by legacy media outlets. They've even called it a successful propaganda campaign by the left, convincing a lot of American people that there was no tax cut when there clearly was for the average working American. Something like, 64% of Americans got a tax cut, concentration being highest enough, thankfully, in the middle class brackets. It's because that was why it was structured. It's not just a tax cut for the economy's sake, it's also a re-election campaign strategy. If you're the president, you want to give more money back to people who can vote for you and who might even chip in $10. Of course you do. Trump's got so many advantages right now, it's almost silly to even talk about the Democrats having a chance at times. They've set themselves up for a monumental failure. Joe Biden is your frontrunner. The only other person who's ever stood as frontrunner, and who, she's not that far behind him, she could rise back up, is a woman, a 71-year-old woman who has consistently for a half a century lied not just about professional things, not just about what policies she does or does not endorse, but on a personal level. She has taken advantage of ethnicity and gender numerous times as a campaign ploy to advance herself politically. That is not a good idea to go up against Trump when you've got that kind of easily exploitable baggage. What's Trump best at? He's literally the best. In all of modern American politics, he's literally the best at exploiting people's personal issues for his own political gain. You're not going to be able to do that to him. His core fans don't care if he said weird shit to Billy Bush. They don't care if he groped somebody. They don't care what he does. They're looking at the economy, and they're looking at policy, and they're looking at diplomacy and things of that nature. They don't care about his personality. They like it. If he insults Elizabeth Warren, calls her a bitch on Twitter, they will cheer. The Democrats really need to understand that. You're playing in Trump's paradigm right now, and you still think that Obama's the president right now. It's not true. That's about all. Peace out.